They say the moment you swear never to love is the exact moment life decides to test you. It was the annual Echelon Gala, a night reserved for the elite, where fortunes danced with fashion and every whispered conversation held the weight of a contract. The crystal atrium of the Van Hurst Hotel sparkled beneath chandeliers imported from Venice, casting rainbows across tuxedos and champagne flutes. The room glittered with gold and ambition. Every camera lens was trained on the man of the hour, Alexander Duvall. He stood at the podium like a statue carved from storm clouds, tall, composed, effortlessly regal in a midnight black suit. His steel-gray eyes scanned the crowd with disinterest, but not cruelty. He was not here to charm. He was here to declare. Whispers fell silent as the mic crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice deep and steady, laced with a refined coldness that both silenced and captivated, "I thank you for your applause." Though I did not come to be celebrated. A ripple of tension moved through the ballroom. I've been asked time and time again, by investors, by friends, by the ever-thirsty press, why I have not married, why I have no heir, why the seat beside me remains empty. He paused. The pause was intentional, calculated, merciless. "I am married to ambition," he said, his voice slicing through the hush like a blade through silk. "I have no room for romance. Love is a luxury I cannot afford. I have seen what it does. I have watched it cripple men once mighty, distract kings from conquest. I've learned from pain, from betrayal." His eyes sharpened, but his tone never cracked. "And so, I make my position clear. Tonight, before this gathering of intellect, influence, and inherited legacy," he lifted a crystal tumbler of vintage scotch, not in celebration, but in ritual. "I swear an oath to remain a bachelor, unshackled, unmoved, until the day I die." There was a breathless beat of silence, the kind that follows the ending of an era. Then chaos. Cameras flashed like lightning. Gasps and laughter mixed with the clinking of glasses. A murmur ran through the crowd like wind through dry grass. Astonishment, admiration, maybe a hint of disbelief. But for the disillusioned elite, the burned, the bruised, the romantically bankrupt, his words were gospel. By sunrise, the internet had christened it the Bachelor's Oath. Hashtag Unshackled trended worldwide. A new cult was born. And Alexander Duvall? He returned to his penthouse alone, unbothered, unreachable, unaware that fate had already begun to write the footnote to his vow, in the form of a woman he had yet to meet. The first time Alexander Duvall heard her voice, it wasn't in a boardroom or whispered over champagne. It was through the static-laced speakers of a community radio station he didn't even know his company owned. And yet again, the woman's voice rang clear, crisp, and utterly indignant. Duvall Global has purchased another historical landmark, the Harrington Library, not to preserve it, but to replace it with yet another luxury complex. Because, of course, the world needs another rooftop bar with skyline views. Heaven forbid we preserve something that holds real stories. Alexander paused mid-sip of espresso. He blinked, and for the first time in a long while, he smirked. Later that day, her name crossed his desk. Dr. Elena Moreau, a literature professor at the University of Eastbridge. Passionate, educated, fearless, trouble. She became a thorn the moment she rallied students and scholars, launching a grassroots petition to block the demolition. The city council, drunk on her charm and clarity, delayed the project. She had made his name synonymous with erasure, and somehow he didn't hate it. So he arrived, not with lawyers, not with contracts, but in person. She stood in front of the aging library doors, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She wasn't dressed for war, just jeans, a scarf, ink on her fingers, but she held her ground like a queen in battle. "You must be Mr. Duvall," she said. "No es might. No fear. Do you always bulldoze before you read the history?" Alexander gave a measured glance at the weather-worn bricks. "Do you always romanticize decay?" She arched a brow. "Some of us consider history worth more than square footage." It was the beginning of something neither of them had planned. He should have walked away. He never argued with civilians. But instead, he offered her a deal, veiled in philanthropy, wrapped in bait. Come work with my foundation, he said. Catalog what you love before it's gone. Save what can be saved. Educate us poor, ignorant capitalists. She hesitated, then accepted, not because she trusted him, but because the books needed her. Weeks passed, and with each interaction, the invisible thread between them grew taut. She challenged him in ways no one dared, questioning his decisions, mocking his opulent taste, pointing out the poetry hidden in dust-covered margins. He expected irritation. He found fascination. She expected coldness. She caught glimpses of something warmer, humor, maybe pain, definitely. One afternoon, while sorting through first editions in a sun-drenched reading room, she read aloud from Byron. He chuckled genuinely. The sound startled them both. You laughed, she noted, setting the book down. Don't be ridiculous, he murmured, turning away too quickly. That evening, over dinner, his younger sister Isabel leaned back in her chair, wine glass in hand, watching him too closely. You made a vow, Alex, she said, lips twitching with amusement. But you didn't plan for her. He said nothing. But that night, for the first time in years, he dreamed of something other than empire. He dreamed of ink-stained fingers brushing his, and a voice reading poetry in the dark. The truth unraveled not in whispers, but in headlines. Billionaire who vowed bachelorhood, now linked to Eastbridge professor. Bachelor's oath icon seen smiling. Is Duvall in love? Oathbreaker? Alexander Duvall's vow under fire amid romance rumors. The articles were merciless. Gossip columns, business journals, even late-night talk shows. They all resurrected that infamous night at the Van Hearst Gala, playing clips of his vow like a sacred chant turned scandalous punchline. And Elena saw it all. Until that moment, she'd never known about the vow. Not fully. He'd never told her. Not once. Not when she sat across from him, sipping black tea and quoting Auden. Not when he watched her laugh like he'd forgotten how painful the world could be. Not even when she kissed him in the quiet of the archives, surrounded by volumes of forgotten poetry. To her, the omission was louder than any vow. Because now, in her eyes, everything they'd shared felt like a contradiction. A game. A man who promised the world he would never love had let her love him anyway. She walked away without ceremony. No shouting, no scenes, just silence, the kind that hums with heartbreak. Days bled into nights. Alexander's penthouse, once a fortress of solitude, became a mausoleum of memories. Her scarf, left behind on the armrest. A volume of Keats with her notes in the margins. The faintest scent of lavender. And in that unbearable quiet, the past finally spoke. He remembered it all. The woman who betrayed him years ago, choosing fame over forever. The night he made the vow, not out of strength, but out of fear, a boy's desperate attempt to harden into stone. He had mistaken walls for wisdom, solitude for safety. But Elena, she had never asked for promises, only truth, and he had failed her. It was raining the night he found her. She was at the Harrington Library, her library now. Alone, kneeling beside a stack of old folios, cataloging by candlelight as a storm rattled the windows. She didn't look up when the doors creaked open. I heard a fool once made a vow in this city, she said softly, eyes never leaving the page. He wore like a crown, spoke like prophecy. Alexander stepped forward, rain still clinging to his coat, hair damp, eyes unguarded for the first time in years. Elena. She looked up, and the pain in her gaze hit him harder than any boardroom betrayal. He didn't speak right away. He simply knelt, not out of show, but surrender. I made that vow, his voice cracked quiet and raw, to protect myself from being hurt, from being seen, from feeling. She didn't interrupt. She let him bleed. But you reminded me that love isn't weakness, that it's the only thing that ever made me feel alive, the only thing worth breaking a vow for. He reached into his coat pocket, not with a ring, not yet, but with a crumpled page from her favorite book of sonnets, one she had once read aloud beside a fireplace. He placed it before her like an offering. Forgive me, he whispered, or don't. But know this, if I must kneel here forever, just to prove my heart remembers what it almost lost, I will. Elena stared at him, silence wrapping around them like smoke. And in the middle of the storm, in the very place they had first stood toe-to-toe, she reached out, slowly, and brushed a raindrop from his cheek. Not a promise. Not yet. But a spark. Rekindled. Alexander decided to retract his vows. It wasn't a gala. It wasn't broadcasted. There were no fireworks, no crystal chandeliers, no gold-foiled invitations. Just an evening sun, mellow and low, spilling amber across the glass dome of the East Bridge Cultural Foundation, the very place Alexander Duvall had built to preserve what Elena fought to protect. The event was meant to be a quiet fundraiser, a gathering of minds, not moguls. Scholars, archivists, students, and a few well-dressed donors sipped elderflower cordial while jazz hummed in the background. The kind of event Elena adored, understated, intimate, intentional. Alexander stood near the podium, fingers loosely curled around note card. He looked different, still sharp in a tailored navy suit. Yes, but the coldness was gone. The mask was gone. What remained was a man stripped of performance. A man becoming. Elena stood to the side, watching. She didn't know what he'd written. He hadn't shown her. But she knew it wasn't for them. The crowd, the press, the curious few still clinging to the myth of the bachelor's oath. It was for her. He stepped up, cleared his throat softly, and began. A few years ago, I stood in a ballroom and made a vow. I said love was a distraction, a weakness. I said I would remain a bachelor until the day I died. A pause. The room went still. At the time, I believed I was protecting myself. But the truth is, I was hiding. Behind ambition, behind fear, behind clever words dressed up as strength. He looked out over the crowd, then found her, his anchor, his fire. But someone once told me that preserving beauty, whether in a poem, a place, or a person, is always worth the risk. And so I offer a new vow. His voice softened, steadied, not to protect myself, but to protect us, to protect love, to protect every fragile, fleeting, beautiful thing I once ran from. The applause came gently, uncertain at first, but the moment settled like starlight, quiet, reverent, real. The headlines came the next morning, of course. Duvall breaks the oath. Love over legacy? Cynics mourn. Romantics rejoice. But Alexander didn't care. The wedding was not televised. It was held in the restored Harrington Library's private garden, a hidden courtyard cradled by ivy-covered stone and shelves of rare books, their spines catching the morning light like stained glass. There were fewer than 30 guests. No drones, no hashtags, just whispered laughter, trembling petals, and pages turning gently in the breeze. Elena wore a dress the color of antique parchment. Alexander Borenotia. The rings were simple. The vows, not memorized but felt. And when it was his turn, he reached for her hand and said, voice low but clear, this time, I swear not to protect myself, but to protect us. To guard what we've built, not with walls, but with wonder. Not with fear, but with faith. She smiled. And in that garden, where literature and love entwined, where oaths had once been shields, they became bridges. Not the end of the story, just the beginning of a life rewritten together. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like, share, and subscribe for more.